Hey kids, this is Ivan. Yeah, we got a lot to cover. This is the fourth installment and we're talking about weapons. Now, we just finished talking about first edition and second edition in terms of weapon specialization, weapons proficiency, and specializing in fighting styles and becoming ambidextrous and all that good junk. Now, another game had a different take on it, and that was Rules Cyclopedia, or BECMI. And essentially, they came up with an alternate idea of weapon specialization called weapons mastery. And this handled everything in one optional unified system. You could still use the basic system where everybody's just assumed to be proficient in all the weapons they're allowed to use, or you could use this instead. Each class still had a list of weapons they were allowed to use, but each weapon had 6 levels of mastery assigned to it. There was unskilled, basic, skilled, expert, master, and grandmaster. Now, because they were using races class, demi-humans and humans were treated a little bit differently. Demi-humans started out at the basic level of proficiency in all weapons. They weren't unskilled in anything that they could use. And they were given an extra slot at level 4 and level 8, and dwarves got another one at level 12. And then depending on where all these guys were, had to stop in terms of leveling, they still got another slot every 200,000 XP if they, decide to continue adventuring. A lot of them did, and it was still fun to play the dwarf, even though he wasn't moving up in level, so he got extra slots at least. Now, how does this really work? Humans started out with 4 proficiency slots if they were a fighter, and 2 proficiency slots if they were anybody else. Extra slots got granted to everybody at levels 3, 6, 9, 11, 15, 23, 30, and 36. But fighters also got some extra slots. They got 3 extra slots at 19, 27, and 33. And then everybody got an extra slot, just like demi-humans, every 200,000 XP after 36 level. If you had not become immortal, you still get some more weapon slots. Now, unlike AD&D, in Rules Cyclopedia Weapons Mastery, first level characters could not spend more than 1 slot per weapon at first level. So pretty much what you were doing was you had a list of weapons you could use. You're unskilled in all of them, so you're going to choose any 4 or 2 weapons that you are going to become basic skilled in. You know how to use it just enough. Now, here's an interesting thing they did, a lot different than AD&D. Any weapon that a character is unskilled in did half damage. And there was no penalty to hit at all except for ranged weapons. So you figured, geez, even if you pick up this mace and you're not proficient in this mace, but you're a fighter, you ought to be able to hit the guy with it. But maybe you're not going to give him a real telling blow, so it's only going to do 1 to 3 points of damage and not 1 to 6. But if you're trying to shoot him with something, that's a little harder. So you're going to get a -1 to hit. A lot less draconian. I like this a lot better in terms of a penalty for not being proficient in a weapon at all. Now, weapons that the character became skilled in had primary and secondary opponents. This is where it got a little wonky, because there were different targets that the weapons were better against in terms of their bonuses. And some were better against armed opponents, some were better against unarmed opponents, or opponents that had like a bow in both hands, so they were considered unarmed. Some were better against people that had missile weapons that they could hurl in their hands. Some were better at attacking monsters. Some were better, attacking people, with all kinds of different stuff. So you had a primary and a secondary table for each weapon. It did better stuff at the, versus a certain type of opponent than another type of opponent. A little wonky, a little complex, but an interesting idea. Now, weapons that a character got skilled in had a few effects, and it got better and better the more skilled you got. The primary effect of the weapon mastery would be increased damage. When you got basic level of skill, it does its full damage. At skilled, it did more damage than it did. It got like a plus to it. So, and an expert, master, grandmaster. By grandmaster, you're doing a lot of damage with any weapon. Next thing it did was it gave you a bonus to the attack roll. This generally went from +2 to +4 to +6 to +8 versus the primary type of opponent, and a +1, +2, +4, and +6 to the secondary type of target. And these happen from skilled to grandmaster. So when you first got the basic level of proficiency, you didn't get any kind of bonus to hit. But once you start to become more skilled, when you spend more slots on that weapon over time, then you got better and better at hitting people as well as causing nasty damage. The tertiary effect of weapon mastery would be the bonus to the AC of the wielder, and this depended on the weapon. But it would also be versus the primary and secondary opponents, so there'd be different levels of AC benefit. But this happened from skilled to grandmaster, same as getting all the other bennies with the weapons. And it would increase your armor class by 1 to 4 places better, and you could use that from 1 to 4 opponents, depending on whether they were your primary or secondary type opponents. So you got really good at not only hitting people, not only causing lots of damage, but actually, improving your armor class with this weapon, using it like a shield and feinting and parrying and doing all the good stuff you're supposed to do with a weapon. The quaternary effect, if you will, of weapon mastery was special effects. You could increase the range of missile weapons. The various weapons could do things like double damage. They could have an increased critical range. They did double damage, like maybe from a 17 to a 20 at sometimes. Deflecting blows, disarming, being able to throw the weapon, like being able to throw a sword, like shonk, right at somebody. Stunning the opponents when you hit them, and even being able to despair your opponents with just when you did something really cool with a weapon successfully, that you had a table based on their intelligence and their hit dice, and they might actually have to check morale and run away because you look so bad using this weapon. So it's a really interesting system. It is also very complex, but as a basic, framework, like, geez, how would I want, to make weapons work? It's pretty cool, and it has a lot of neat stuff because it differentiates different types of weapons in terms of what they do. Some weapons stun opponents, and those are big club-like weapons like a mace. Some weapons entangle people. That's more like a net or a whip or something. Some weapons would tend to disarm people. These would be things like flails or swords or rapiers. So it made a lot of sense. It was a really cool system, and I think they got it a lot better than first and second edition did. Still good systems, but just got a little really wonky, and something like this just got really down and dirty with the various weapons and how bad you could get.